Alright, I am going to show a couple ways to use iMacros in WorkflowGen that are a little bit useful. iMacros is just a plugin for various browsers. This is Firefox that allows you to record and play back various actions in a browser. So I've got a demo process set up here. If you look at the form, it's just a basic form, but I do have a grid view in here, which is one of the reasons in the past I've found myself using iMacros. I want to capture this data in process data, which takes a little bit of extra work. If we look at the ID, it's called grid view. We're going to capture this title piece of data. So normally you'd go to mapping, you click your action, and then you just map that data into process data, but it doesn't exist. Grid view doesn't do it that way. It's a little bit more manual. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create some process data's elements in order to capture that data, to the destination for that data. Here's iMacro. Here comes the tab. We're going to use just the current macro. These are some other recorded ones. Go to the record tab. You can look at the options. You see there's a few different modes. We'll just start with the select automatically mode. And then we will click record. You can see the commands being recorded up there in iMacro syntax. Start a new data. Normally this opens in a pop-up window, but you can see up here iMacro forces it onto a new tab so that it can record by tabs. This is just stuff I've typed in before. We're going to use this same title. We got to pick a description. So there we got what we want. We save and close. And then at that point we're going to stop. We'll go over here to manage, edit the macro. Here's the actual macro itself. You can see it goes to the URL, tab URL. It clicks the new data. Well, this is where we click new data. It goes to the second tab. Here's a couple of places where we filled in data, and then it clicks a button and goes back to tab 1. I can tell you right away, for WorkflowGen anyway, you never want this URL go to. And tab 1 we don't care about. So we'll go ahead and delete that. Here's where we want to make changes. So for this next one, we're going to add 2. So we'll change both of these inputs to 2. Other than that, it should be the same. Let's click save and close. Go back and hit play. Since we're in the place where we started last time, we can start from here. We'll hit play. And here it failed. As you can see, it's waiting for tab 2 to open. Tab 2 is already open. But the macro went faster than the browser could handle, which is a common thing. So we'll stop this. We'll close this tab again. We'll edit our macro. Right here where it's trying to switch over to tab 2, we'll add a little wait. We'll give it a good half second of wait time, just to give the browser a chance to catch up before the macro trucks on ahead. Save and close that, and we'll try it again. Boom, that fast, it created number 2. So now that we have a working instance, we're going to go ahead and create a whole bunch of them. So we'll take the part that's repeatable, which starts up here where we click new data, and then it ends where we go back to tab 1. We'll copy this, and then here you can use whatever method you want to create more of these with incrementing numbers. That's what we're doing here. It's all text. You can manipulate it in whatever text manipulation you feel comfortable with. We're going to use PowerShell here just because it's a simple way. I won't turn this into a PowerShell lesson, but we're starting essentially with a multi-line string. We just want this to increment up each time. That's really all we want. So we'll add a little code in here. I'll just paste it in from another window. Without getting too much into the details, you can see it's just a for loop. Starts at 3, ends at 20. And then instead of these numbers at the end, we're inserting a little bit of formatting here with our loop. And then if we run it, you can see we got 20, 19, 18, 17. So that's what we want. We'll select all this, and we will copy it back into our iMacro right on top of that last one. You can see here it goes all the way back up to 3, which is where we want to start because we already have 1 and 2 done. So we'll move straight back into the form. We'll just play this macro. Boom, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. This is where the savings comes in. This would take a lot of point and click to get through all this data entry. So this is much faster. There you go. We have our 20 process data elements. Now, just to continue on with our demonstration, what we really want to do is get some parameters on this action. You can see we've got our normal out mappings right here. This is where you would manually input new parameters in order to get those data elements out into process data. So let's use iMacros for that too. Let's click record here. Open up the action. You can see now it's not a pop-up window. Flip it over to parameters, also not a pop-up window. We don't care about those navigations, so we're going to stop it to delete those little lines of recording there and start it again. Here's where we really want to start recording. Add a parameter. So now we're going to add a parameter. So that's the syntax that grid view uses to make a parameter push data out to process data. We'll select our process data element that we created earlier, 1 to 1, save it and close it, and again we're done. Go over here, edit the macro. Here's the basics. Once again, we don't care about that navigation. We don't want it to happen. You'll try it and it'll wreck your macro. So you experiment around with it until you get it the way you want it. You can always try to do it over again. So we will copy this same stuff. Boom. We will paste it in a PowerShell. I'm just going to go ahead and paste in the PowerShell script from before in the interest of time. It's the same thing. It's 3 to 20. Down here we're adding the number. This one's slightly different because as you can see in here, during this point, this is the line where we selected our dropdown, and it's got some sort of internal ID that identifies that dropdown element that we selected. It's arbitrary, but that's okay. We can use that. In here you'll see I mathed it out backwards and started here. So when I is 3, it adds whatever the increment is to the initial number. It'll just increment up and up and up and up, so that it'll select one drop-down element further down each time. And since we have them all in order in the drop-down, that should work for this one. So we will clear screen. What confusion? Do it again. Here you can see we got 20, 19, 18, 17. Here's our incrementing IDs for the drop-down. Copy that. Paste it into the iMacros. Save it. We're where we want to be. To start with add parameter, we hit play, and it should start adding those. 5, 6, 7, 8. Now this demo actually might not have worked properly because I think my drop-down ID numbers were not correct. This was from a demo I put together earlier, and the ID numbers looks like have changed. So it's a fine example because it's part of the things you'll have to deal with if you try to do this. So here we have our parameters. These should all look like this. They should have the matching data out elements over here. They didn't because we had our numbers wrong. So you would just diagnose that issue, figure out where the numbers belong, delete all these with the red X's and start over again. But it's a fine demo for now. You can see the kind of thing that you're faced with. It's quick, it's dirty, but it works. For something like this where that would take a day's worth of point and clicks and typing to get that to work without using a macro. Some of the other things that you can do, let's see, we'll move over to a different process here. This is one of our actual production processes. One thing that is really useful about iMacros is something like this. If you're going to test this form, you can see we have a whole bunch of required elements to be filled out. If we wanted to run through this form, say, 100 times in the course of testing this process, that's a lot of typing, even if it's just using the tab and the down arrow to fill in these. So I'll go ahead and record a macro for it. We've already done that here. I've recorded myself filling that out. Hit play. Boom, all of them are filled out that fast. So this is a place to start. You can now edit these before you hit submit, or you could create a new macro for each test, whatever you want to do. Much faster than typing individually. When you are recording some of these things, it might be helpful to note, you can mix these recording modes. So you see in this one, we'll start with conventional recording mode or whatever is automatic. And say we recorded this and we hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. We'll just use whatever's in there. Okay, great. It recorded those for us. Stop it. We'll edit that. We'll see. Here's the lines. Say these are the 2 lines that we liked out of that worked properly on testing. But some elements don't work with a certain kind of recording. So say we wanted to use a different kind of recording, we would move over to, say, experimental mode, which you'd only know by trying. We'll record that. We'll use that to do something else. Stop it. Now you can mix and match these. So here's the command that caused it to do that file upload. But we like those other fills, so you can mix and match. Anything that creates a command and recording, you can mix and match into a macro to be played back later. You don't have to use one or the other type of recording. Another thing that's a little more rare, but that I've found use for a couple times, is you can actually scrape data from the screen using iMacros. So there was an instance where, for instance, we needed some data out of this same process that we didn't have recorded in any good way. Like we needed a bunch of dates of creation. So, normally you could use say a report that would show you this, but we wanted this creation date for a whole bunch of arbitrary list of arbitrary requests, not a bunch in a row, not that we could sort by any particular report, and also we're not pulling this process data out into our own database, which we do with a lot of stuff. So we couldn't do it that way. The simplest way that I could think of was to use iMacros. So I came in here and I recorded myself, using the request box, typing in a request number, and then found that here's the started date that we want. I fiddled around until I figured out what the ID was that iMacros was using to find this recording date, and then recorded this macro. So let's look at the macro. You can see that navigation happening here. This is where I typed in the request number, hit the enter key, waited 5 seconds, it popped up into a new tab, and then this was the line that I found to do the data extraction. Now this I just found in the iMacros online documentation, the syntax to use for extracting something. It uses the iMacros pointer to find that label, and then it extracts it. And this will just extract it. See, I used the script to create my whole list of requests that I needed to pull data for here. It was a long list. It was totally worth scripting rather than going through one at a time. Ran it, it went through and showed each page and extracted that text, and at the end it uses this save as to save it to a CSV file. So I had my CSV file, I imported that into my database, and was saved from having to do a whole bunch of tiny, tedious manual entry and copying. So that's another thing that can work occasionally. It's pretty rare that you run into that situation, but it's also useful. My name is Eric Sanford. I work for the OVPR, the Office of the VP for Research. We use WorkflowGen for a few different things. And this is what I found was useful, ways to use iMacros. Because we don't have keys to the world, such as it is here in our department, we can't log into the server database directly. We can't log into the back-end infrastructure. So once in a while, we're forced to use the UI to do a bunch of tedious, repetitive stuff, and iMacros works great for that. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, esanford@umn.edu.